All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really bold premise from our source text, Buddha Reborn. We're going to zero in on its opening chapter, which is titled, Now Here I Have Returned. We'll be taking a strictly educational look at the philosophical structure here, because whether you're a student of religion, philosophy, or just, a curious learner, there's this incredibly structured, step-by-step psychological journey mapped out in these pages that's absolutely worth exploring. So the text frames itself in a pretty dramatic way. It presents itself as a direct message from a reborn Buddha, literally reaching out to disciples across a massive 2,500-year gap. And the core message? He's urging those disciples from past lives to spiritually awaken right here in the modern era. It's a fascinating narrative device that just instantly bridges ancient history with our present day. To make sense of this dense spiritual text, we're going to follow its internal logic through what we'll call an awakening arc. We'll look at the call to awaken, the three treasures, becoming ruler of the mind, the lotus in the mud, and finally, a mission of compassion.
Section 1. The Call to Awaken.
Right out of the gate, the author vividly sets the scene at Vulture Peak over in ancient India, which, is a really famous spot where the historical Buddha actually taught. The text makes this big assertion. While countries, names, and even clothes have changed over the millennia, the human mind's capacity to feel universal truth, that remains completely unchanged. It's an appeal to this eternal connection between teacher and student that totally defies the passage of time. Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast the text draws. To actually awaken, the author insists that you can't be swayed by modern distractions. It specifically warns against getting caught up in things like impressive job titles, material wealth, or just the shifting opinions of the public. Instead, it treats these things as fleeting illusions, putting them in direct opposition to the eternal values of the soul.
Moving on to Section 2. The Three Treasures.
So, if we're rejecting those fleeting worldly values we just talked about, what replaces them? Well, the source states that disciples have to take refuge in three pillars: the Buddha, meaning the enlightened one, the Dharma, referring to the universal teachings, and the Sangha, the community of practitioners. The text claims these three treasures are the absolute core of the spiritual path, and that they transcend all specific regions and historical eras.
And this leads into a really unique view on where the human soul actually comes from. It doesn't just say the Buddha is a teacher, it describes the Buddha as the soul's parent. Following that logic, it uses this beautiful imagery to describe the Dharma, the teachings, as an umbilical cord. Basically, it's a lifeline supplying continuous spiritual nourishment and lifeblood directly to the child.
Section 3, Ruler of the Minds.
Okay, so once a person is hooked up to this spiritual nourishment, the whole focus shifts inward. The text throws down a direct challenge. You have to build and govern a kingdom of the mind. Which sounds great, right? But it immediately begs the question, how exactly do you become the true sovereign ruler of your own internal world, especially when the outside world is constantly pulling at you? Well, according to the source, the only way to become a true ruler is by mastering your own soul's movements. The first big step? Severing earthly attachments. You have to let go of that obsession with status and wealth we touched on earlier. By doing this, you're essentially refusing to let external, worldly values dictate your internal peace. And that's what allows you to achieve total mental sovereignty. And the actual mechanism for doing this, the author explains, is constant, rigorous self-reflection. Specifically, a kind of reflection based on the traditional Buddhist framework of the Eightfold Path. The text frames this not just as like passive meditation, but as active work. It's a method to systematically erase internal evil and temper the mind. Think of it almost like building and strengthening your spiritual muscle.
Which brings us to Section 4, the lotus in the mud.
All right, having established this strong, purified internal kingdom, the narrative zooms back out to the external world, and it uses a really striking visual metaphor to do it. The text describes this foul, impure swamp. It's filled with muddy water, bad odors, but then it notes that the lotus flower doesn't avoid this environment. No, it willingly plants its seeds right there in the filth so it can bloom into something breathtakingly beautiful. Impartially speaking, this serves as just an incredibly powerful allegory for the human condition. The muddy swamp directly represents our modern world, right? A society full of hardships, temptations, noise, and in contrast, the lotus represents that purified soul we just talked about building. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that the text does not tell its disciples to run away, hide in the mountains, or escape the corrupt world. Not at all. It commands them to exist right in the middle of it. You're supposed to embrace that muddy environment, extend a clean, uncorrupted stem upward, and manifest rare spiritual beauty right smack in the middle of the chaos.
Finally, Section 5, a mission of compassion.
But why do we do this? Why bother blooming in the mud? The author introduces another beautiful metaphor to explain it, the concept of spiritual groundwater. The text explains that when you selflessly try to quench the spiritual thirst of other people, an endless supply of courage, love, and light will spring forth from inside of you. It's kind of like tapping into this infinite underground well of the Buddha's love. Ultimately, the argument here is that building your kingdom of the mind and severing your attachments is definitely not a selfish endeavor. You aren't just purifying yourself for your own personal peace. It's a strictly necessary step to get the strength and stability you need to save others in a really difficult, swamp-like world. Your self-mastery is literally the tool used for global compassion. As we wrap up this explainer, the structure of Buddha Reborn leaves us with a pretty compelling philosophical challenge, completely regardless of your own personal spiritual beliefs. If we accept that modern society can often be a muddy swamp, how can we cultivate our own inner tranquility and strength to bring something beautiful and helpful into an increasingly chaotic world? It's definitely a question worth reflecting on today.